The Detroit Lions' Week 9 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings might have been their worst offensive line performance of the season, and definitely their worst offensive line performance since Week 1 when facing the Green Bay Packers. The Lions seemed unorganized, they didn't communicate very well, and while injuries certainly played a part with the Lions playing 9 different offensive line rotations in that game, that isn't an excuse, right? The offensive line should be ready to go. Hank Fraley should have his players ready to play as he typically does, and while it wasn't all bad, of course, the Detroit Lions allowed 5 sacks on the day. They lost 44 yards, 2 sacks, and only ran the ball 20 times for 65 yards, averaging less than 4 yards per carry. The offensive line was not good, and a lot of players missed time, right? Taylor Decker missed snaps, Christian Mahogany missed snaps, Tate Ratledge missed snaps, Penei Sewell missed snaps, and as I mentioned, the Lions played 9 different combinations along the offensive line on Sunday, which, if you ask any offensive line coach, if you ask any quarterback, isn't going to amount to a lot of success. It's going to hurt your communication. It's going to hurt your pass blocking ability. It's going to hurt your run blocking ability. And while the offense wasn't great, the offense didn't move very well throughout portions of the game, and a lot of people will blame John Morton for that. It's hard to run a successful offensive system with 9 different offensive lineups going out onto the field at any given point during the game. Now, where do the Detroit Lions stand as of today? Walking out of that game against Minnesota, they're banged up. Their offensive line is injured, and I'm not sure that most of them will play next week against the Washington Commanders. Taylor Decker is questionable with a knee injury. Dan Campbell said it's unlikely that he will practice on Wednesday, but hasn't officially ruled him out for Sunday, although I think it is expected. He did finish the game for the Detroit Lions battling a knee injury, and then I believe suffered something in the upper body shoulder region as well. He could play. He is potentially unlikely to play, but is possible for him to suit up for the Detroit Lions against the Washington Commanders. And Taylor Decker's good, right? Taylor Decker is a good, strong, veteran offensive lineman that makes the Detroit Lions better when he is on the field. If you compare the offensive performances with Taylor Decker out there versus the games where Taylor Decker was not there, it's pretty obvious to see that the Lions score more points. They are more efficient. They run the football better when Taylor Decker is on the line. And if they are without him against Washington, I still think they could win that game. I still think they can be okay. But obviously, you want your starting tackle out there to be healthy and start making plays for you. Penei Sewell is the big one. He left the game with an unspecified lower leg injury. And while he did finish the game against Minnesota, he also is unlikely to practice on Wednesday and is questionable going into the game. Now, Penei only missed a few finite snaps. I believe he missed 1 drive's worth of snaps while he was in the locker room, getting healed and getting taped up and everything like that. He returned to the game. He played a majority of the second half, finished the game, and seemed okay. It wasn't great, but it was better than what it potentially could have been. He finished the game. He finished the game well. And if he is able to play on Sunday, he is going to play. It's going to come down to one of those situations where if playing will not make the injury worse, Penei Sewell is going to play, right? If it is a bad bruise that isn't going to get hurt more, if it is, something that is just maybe a little bit pulled, but isn't really at risk of being more injured or injury prone, Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell are going to play. If it is something where, there's a slight fracture, there's, something that could get worse and now is more susceptible to injury, the Lions may keep Penei Sewell out for the game and may just rest him until going into next week's contest. Christian Mahogany is the really bad news, right? He has broken a bone in his leg. And while his season-ending injury is not necessarily on the table, he is out for a long time. Dan Campbell says probably don't expect him to return until mid to late December as the Detroit Lions gear up for a playoff push, and that is not good. Christian Mahogany is a good guard. He is a good football player. He is a good offensive lineman for this team, and while he's not elite, he's not the best offensive lineman in the world, he is certainly a starting quality player. He is, I think, among the top half of starting guards in the NFL when it comes to quality of play and talent, and it's going to hurt to not have him out there. It hurt last week to not have him out there when he was missing snaps against Minnesota, and that is going to be a big loss for Detroit. Now, the Lions did go out and make a couple of small signings at the trade deadline, and while they didn't trade for anybody, they did sign a couple players. Jack Connolly comes over from I believe the New England Patriots practice squad. He played almost 60 games in college at Boston College, and he is a player that the Lions trust to hopefully, potentially play a depth role on that team. And Netane Moody also has returned, a guard that in the preseason the Lions tend to really like. They bring back a guy that they trust, they feel knows the playbook, they feel obviously could slide in a little earlier than Jack Connolly, and that is the offensive line moves that they have made. Now, the positive news coming out of this week is a very cryptic tweet from a Detroit Lions player, that being Miles Frazier, who just essentially sent out a tweet of, the two hands coming together emoji. Now, Miles Frazier could potentially return sooner rather than later. It was a quiet trade deadline, and with the injuries the Lions suffered at the offensive line, it would have made sense for Brad Holmes to go out and make a move. It would have made sense for Brad Holmes to go do something to help the offensive line gain some depth, to gain some quality, and to add a starting quality player that they currently do not have at the left guard position. However, it would make sense if Brad Holmes didn't add that player because he felt he had it already on the roster in Miles Frazier. Now, his practice window has not opened yet. He is not designated to return to the team as of today, but you don't probably feel like you need it against Washington. Their defensive line isn't great, and Frankie Luvo was just ruled out of the game, I believe, due to a suspension, but he will not be playing, along with Jaden Daniels not playing in that game either. The offensive line should be good enough to get the Detroit Lions a victory, whether it's Miles Frazier starting, whether it's Coyote Awashia, whether it's whoever else is going to start at that guard position. They should be okay versus the Washington front. It isn't super formidable, and the Lions should be able to win that game, especially with the defense they have in facing a backup quarterback. However, if we go through a week or 2 weeks and Miles Frazier gets a little healthier, he starts returning to practice, you could potentially see him take up that left guard position. And based on what he did at LSU, I think he's a good fit. I think he's one of the biggest steals of the draft. He's one of the best talents that fell due to injury in the draft. And much like Christian Mahogany from a year ago, Miles Frazier could come in about week 11, start playing some football, start making a couple of snaps here and there, get a starting role and earn a starting spot on this offensive line, and play very well until Christian Mahogany can return in weeks 13, 14 as the Detroit Lions again get ready to play in January. Now, the question remains, what will the Lions offensive line look like in week 10? Well, there's a couple scenarios here. I think potentially your best case scenario, you have Taylor Decker, Coyote Awashia, Graham Glasgow, Tate Ratledge, and Penei Sewell. I think Ratledge, Glasgow are really the only two players that you can expect 100% to be starting on this line. As I said, I think Penei Sewell is likely to start and play. He played a majority of the game against the Minnesota Vikings. If he's capable of going, he is going to go. And I think the same thing for Taylor Decker. The fact that he finished the game is very encouraging for the Lions as well. But I think the most likely outcome is either this lineup being Dan Skipper at left tackle, Graham Glasgow at guard with Tristan Colon at center, Tate Ratledge at right guard, and Penei Sewell at right tackle. The, of course, big drawback here is the fact that you would change centers, which is probably not something you want to do coming off a loss. Messes with the quarterback's feel of the ball, potentially messes with the offensive lineup and the alignment and the communication again, and that's really not something that you want to do. But I think the most likely, the most probable offensive line combo is Dan Skipper, Coyote Awashia, Graham Glasgow at center, Tate Ratledge at right guard, and Penei at right tackle. This is not a great lineup, but I think it is a serviceable lineup for a week to stand in and play. I think come, the week after against Philadelphia, the Lions will return a guy like Taylor Decker, and the offensive line will look good. Coyote Awashia, not a great football player, not the greatest offensive lineman, but the Lions have leaned on him in the past, and they've found good results. They leaned on him against Minnesota in last year's game going to Minnesota, and yeah, he had some struggles, but he also made some really good plays. Coyote Awashia played in the NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers when Jonah Jackson was unable to do so. Coyote Awashia has starting experience on this line. He has communication experience with Graham Glasgow. He's communicated well with Taylor Decker in the past, with Penei Sewell. He's worked in that unit, and that unit has sufficiently gotten the Detroit Lions victories in that time span. And I think for a couple of games, he will be okay. Do you want Coyote Awashia to play a lot of games for you? Probably not. But if he's playing 2 or 3 as a spot starter until Miles Frazier gets healthy, until they can find a better replacement option, I think you can do worse than Awashia on the Detroit Lions offensive line. And they're going to need him. They're going to need him to play well. Next upcoming offensive line battles, you go to Washington and their interior isn't bad. It's not great. Their pass rush isn't fantastic, but their front four is not bad. They have some really strong defensive tackles in that group, and it's a group that gave the Lions trouble last year in the playoffs as they face them in the divisional round. They then go to Philadelphia, whose pass rush isn't nearly as formidable as a season ago, but still quite solid for what it is. They go to New York, that has 3 fantastic pass rushers and Dexter Lawrence in the middle. You go to Green Bay again, who gave them trouble last time. You go to Dallas, who just traded for Quinnen Williams. You go to Los Angeles, who has some great players on their line. Pittsburgh, and face TJ Watt. Minnesota again, who just took the Detroit Lions lunch money and really gave them issues there. And you play Chicago, who's probably your weakest defensive line remaining on the schedule, but you don't really have a week off with this schedule for the offensive line. It's Philadelphia, it's New York, it's Green Bay, it's Dallas, it's Los Angeles, it's Pittsburgh, it's Minnesota. There's a lot of playing time, and there's a lot of great defensive linemen the Lions will have to face over the next 2 months. And if they can't win those battles, they won't win those games. If they can't run the ball well, if they can't pass protect, they won't win football games, and they won't win nearly as many football games as they potentially could have. This is a season for the Detroit Lions that feels a little bit backwards, right? It feels like a step back. It feels like a rebuilding year, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. If the offensive line can win football games, this is still an 11, 12 win franchise for the Detroit Lions. This is still a team that can win a lot of games, go to the playoffs, compete for a division title, compete for a Super Bowl. But if the offensive line is injured, if the offensive line plays like they did a week ago, they're not going to win more than 11 games. They're probably not going to win 10 games in this NFL season. And they may sneak into the wild card. They may sneak into the playoffs for the 3rd season in a row, but they're not going to win a lot without an offensive line. They're not going to win a lot if Penei Sewell misses time. They're not going to win a lot if their offensive line cannot be strong. The offensive line has been the strength of Detroit. It's been the strength of the Lions for many, many years, and it needs to continue to do so in order for the Lions to find success. As of today, it could be worse. The injury news could be worse. Taylor Decker is not a long-term injury. Penei Sewell is not a long-term injury. Christian Mahogany will return by playoffs, and hopefully the Lions will be more full strength as they get to the playoffs, which really at the end of the day is the more important factor. It doesn't matter if you win 11 games and make the playoffs or 15 games and make the playoffs. As we saw last year, once you hit December, once you hit January, it is a completely different ball game. And if the Lions go in as a wild card team, if they go in as the 6th seed, but they go in with a fully healthy offensive line, a fully healthy defensive unit, and a great play caller behind them in John Morton, I think that they're going to win playoff games. That's what it matters. It matters to get to the playoffs, not necessarily where you are. If you can win the division, that's a huge bonus. If you can host a playoff game, that's massive. But at the end of the day, it's about being healthy in January. And if the Detroit Lions can do that, which none of these injuries should affect them by playoff time, they will be okay. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know down in the comments below your opinions on these injuries, how drastic you think they are, and how impactful they will be for next week. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions in the comments down below. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.